All right. Well, thanks for doing this, Zach Evanish. I've obviously only been familiar with you on the internet, but this is the cool thing about the internet is we can kind of like randomly text each other and then get on a conversation.
Hells
Um,
yeah.
so yeah, nice to meet you.
Great to
Um,
meet you. I'm excited. I
yeah.
love
So
to talk wrestling.
that
Re-
yeah,
Wrestlers get it.
yeah. I mean, so what is your connection with the wrestling world in
Sure.
general?
I started wrestling in 1989. My older brother got me into wrestling. He started wrestling as a sophomore in high school. And he told me about the greatest sport on earth. He's like, I just joined this sport and it's the best sport on earth. And he's like, we fight people in practice. And my older brother, when we were younger, would get into fights all the time. It's kind of like a long, lanky kid. People would bully him. And my brother liked to scrap, so he would fight people. And so I'm not sure who told him about wrestling, but he goes out for the wrestling team late as a sophomore. And back then, it's not very often now, but they had a freshman team, a JV team, and then varsity. So you kind of made your way through the ranks. And so as a sophomore, he was on the JV team. We had a pretty good wrestling team at our high school. Had a kid that year win the state title, and we were a very like blue collar town. And I was the opposite of my brother. I had never gotten into fights. I wasn't strong and fit the way he was. He'd be running 3 times a day. He was doing kind of like Dan Gable esque things before we knew of Dan Gable. So I remember he'd say stuff like, Zach, I have this idea that anytime I want to open the refrigerator, I have to do 20 push ups. So, like all day, you'd see my brother doing push ups. I would go with him to purchase weights for his room, which was downstairs. And so when he told me about wrestling, he's like, this is the sport you need to get into. And my parents are not from America. We were all born in Israel, but my dad was born in Romania. So when we came to America, we did, European sports, soccer. He would take us to the park to play pickup soccer, pickup basketball, and we get into wrestling. And so once my brother said, "You are wrestling, Zach," this was the end of my 8th grade. I just started running all the time. I'd run almost every day. I would do calisthenics. I would lift weights in his room, and then we would buy VHS tapes to learn wrestling, and we would wrestle each other in the downstairs. And I remember one of those tapes was Carl Adams back in the day when Boston College had a wrestling team. Carl Adams had this VHS. So I learned how to wrestle by watching a VHS and then my brother and I drilling. Now, when I got to high school that fall, I got killed in wrestling so bad. I lost every wrestle off freshman year by pin, and I just didn't have the skill. I wasn't strong like these other kids were, and our town, I didn't know about it, had a very good recreation program. And so all the kids on the team started wrestling in 3rd grade, in 6th grade. So I was very far, behind with comparison to where they were physically, everything. Well, the end of freshman season starts approaching near. And I remember our last practice, I'm starting to win. I'm starting to take kids down. I'm starting to beat kids during matches in practice. But freshman has no more dual meets. And so in between like 2 of the 3 matches, I'm sitting down and the kid's like, oh my God, like you're winning, you're starting to beat guys. He's like, we were all making bets during lunch about when you were going to quit. And I remember, Dalton, I remember this like yesterday. I thought to myself, quit? I didn't even know you're allowed to quit. I thought when you sign up, that's it. You are in it from the beginning to the end. Well, after wrestling season ended, I went to the gym the very next day. I went back and joined up the local gym, and I would basically train 5, 6, 7 days a week, running, lifting. And there was a wrestling club in our area, but they didn't really teach you how to wrestle. It was just open mat. It was called Light Tower Wrestling Club in Edison. Back then, the only wrestling club I had heard of was Edge, Ernie Monaco. And you didn't really know much. You were like, how do you get there? Do you have to get invited? It was like this special underground place. Well, anything I did was basically I followed my older brother. So going to this Light Tower Wrestling Club twice a week, I was lifting after school, wrestling club twice a week, and I started to get better. I started to wrestle with better kids. And my brother had me going to any off-season tournament we could get to, which weren't many. It was like one every other month.
Okay.
And at Light Tower, they had a bunch of little flyers, pamphlets for the first ever John Smith intensive wrestling camp. It was the summer of 1990. And there was like 20 something kids in that camp. Every single kid was a high school state champ, a high school All-American, a prep national champ. And then John Smith has us running and he calls your name and says, "What are you doing here? What's your goal?" And I say to him, "I never won a match before." And with his accent, he goes, "Well, you will now." And he says to me, and that intensive camp, I still utilize lessons from that camp to this day, the summer of 1990. And all we drilled was a low single, high crotch, and an offensive sprawl. So if you sprawl, you then like hip into the guy and run him over. And I remember seeing John Smith do that in the world championships. He would sprawl and then hip into the guy and bulldoze him over. But we drilled so many low singles that my t-shirts were stained with blood from the collarbones. And high crotch right, high crotch left, just oh, and we also drilled an arm drag. So 3 moves plus the defense. And that next year I went 10-5. So I went 0 and whatever. The next year 10-5. And then to fast forward through high school, I trained so much that I actually broke my body down. And that was kind of the beginning of some knee problems that I started experiencing, and didn't really have answers, right? There's no internet. You don't know how to rehab. Doctors are saying, stop wrestling, do nothing, just rest. And now, being a strength coach of wrestlers for 20 plus years, now I understand how to optimally train the body, how to minimize or actually try to avoid the overuse injuries that wrestlers get with knee injuries, shoulder injuries. Those are the 2 most common injuries of wrestlers. And you knowing me through the internet, Dalton, is because I started writing articles in, I think, 2002. And then in 2006, I posted my first video on YouTube. And it was kind of video footage of me training wrestlers from my backyard and my house. And that group of wrestlers was a group of kids who had not made it out of their district tournament. And all they did was wrestled in the off season 2 to 3 days a week and lifted with me in the garage, the backyard. And then we'd go to this playground down the road. And so they would train with me 3 days a week, maybe twice a week. That next year, all those kids, one of those kids made it to states. They all made it to regions. And then all of them, the second year of training, placed in the states. And the reason why is they had this very simple stay in their lane attitude of work with one wrestling coach and have one strength and conditioning coach. And they just were dominating and bulldozing kids. Like some of them beat state champs during the season. They would beat state place winners in the off season. And it wasn't like today where I have this motto where I've never seen, I say athletes. I'm going to say I've never seen wrestlers do so much stuff and achieve so little in return, meaning they go to multiple wrestling clubs, they go to this strength coach, then they got this speed coach, then they got this footwork coach. When really, if you want to get faster, you have to learn to drill faster and you have to improve your technique and you have to do strength training that employs, dynamic effort, speed work. You don't need all this such fancy stuff. What I'm seeing now is wrestlers are coasting so they could survive from one practice to the next. And so, the long story is I've been on the mat since 89. Once I began teaching, I coached at the middle school and high school level, and I've also coached Division I level, Rutgers and Lehigh. And so I've had a private facility for about 21 years now.
That's cool. So yeah, I mean, that's a journey into the sport. So did you like thinking back when you were younger, like what do you think it was though that kept you in, like, say, the idea? I know you said in your mind you didn't think there was a reason to quit, but I think I would assume that it had something to do with the brother aspect, right? Like I always think that, wrestling is a fight, right? So I always joke about if the principals ever actually found out what wrestling actually was, they'd probably stop letting people do it.
So
Um,
funny.
because, you put two boys together, they're gonna start fighting, and then as you start fighting, you start wrestling. But what made it so easy for you not to quit? Or, what do you think about that? Like,
I really thought that I wasn't allowed to quit from a rule perspective of my parents and being part of the school. I thought when you signed up for something, there is no quitting. I didn't even know that that was an option. And ironically, somebody just texted me earlier about a kid who could have been good, who quit wrestling, who's quit wrestling in the past. And quitting becomes a habit, just like winning can become a habit.
yeah,
And I remember sophomore year, I won my first match and then I lost the next 5 matches. And then I remember going home, getting so pissed off, saying, like, is this what you're going to do? You're going to put in all this work and you're going to lose? And then I won the last 9 matches of the season because I changed my mind, my attitude. And I wish, of course, that I would have been trained properly back then. We didn't really have, like I said, there was no coaching at this
yeah,
wrestling club. And also with the training I did, it wasn't even strength and conditioning. It was bodybuilding copied out of these magazines, which, it's kind of the same mistakes I see wrestlers doing today, Dalton. I see kids, like if I go into a local gym and I want to buy a protein shake and I just scan their gym, I'll see a bunch of teenagers on their phone and they're doing cable and machine exercises. You don't see a lot of power cleans and deep squats and sprinting on sleds. You go to the local park, you don't see anybody running hill sprints. These are the basics that wrestlers need, just like wrestlers need to get great at the basic drills. In the last Olympics, when Gable Stevenson won the Olympics, he won it with a go behind, which is a move you learn in like kindergarten, right? Snap and spin. David Taylor
yeah,
won with a double leg takedown, which is the first thing you learn in recreation wrestling. And so they're doing, quote unquote, the same stuff, but they're doing it infinitely better than anybody else. And so there's, of course, the aspect of what the wrestlers are doing with training, but now it's the aspect of how do you do it that makes the difference.
yeah. Well, don't you think too, like, I wanted to talk to you because, I was a high school wrestling coach for, over 10 years, and, I've been around for a long time. I had a lot of success. I was from a small town, and a lot of my success came because I was strong. I was basically, I'm from a small town, so I didn't have access to the clubs and stuff like that. So in the off season, I was getting as strong as I possibly could because I just assumed that, if I was super strong, anybody who was better than me was going to have to really go through a fight in order to beat me. But now, as a coach, you see a lot of people avoiding the weight room, obviously through
Yeah.
health and lifestyle of their families and stuff like that. But I often think like, sometimes I think we wrestle too much with some kids just because if they were lifting 3 days a week as opposed to wrestling, their bodies would like develop, and then they would increase their ability to fight somebody if they had more muscle. And
Yes.
sometimes we overtrain in the wrestling so that because obviously good really high level kids want to wrestle all the time, need to wrestle all the time because they're trying to sharpen that sword of very small differences between the top three guys. But so many of the lower level kids oftentimes avoid the physical stuff. And yeah, I think just I wanted to hear just your perspective on why kids need to lift, and just how to encourage people to get into the weight room more. And even the higher level kids, I think some kids avoid it because they're so good at wrestling. And oftentimes that leads to the susceptibility of injury, right?
Yes.
I'm 36 years old, and because I love the weight room and love strength and conditioning work, I'm still wrestling every day, and I see, friends that I wrestled in college, and they can't wrestle because their bodies are broken down. So, yeah, what do you think
Yes.
about some
I
of that?
I call that durability. And I've seen your videos, you're doing deep squats, cleans. You're training the way the wrestlers need to train. And when I look at a high level wrestler who is avoiding the weight room, like in the college sector, that is the difference between winning in the blood round and not winning in the blood round. It's the difference between maybe placing eighth or seventh versus third, second, or first. You need to be strong AF, and it helps your technique. And then the durability factor is everything, right? Because if you're not healthy, if you're not available, it doesn't matter how great of a wrestler you are. And some kids could get away with it. They might have natural strength, natural power, natural flexibility. But those are the outliers. They are the 1 in 1,000. What I'm starting to see a lot today is wrestlers who can't do a proper push up. One, core locked in, body straight. Wrestlers who can't do a full range pull up, extending their arms all the way, no leg swinging. And so when you lack strength, it impedes your ability to perform at the next level. So, okay, you got a great high crotch, you got a great double or sweep single. On bottom, you could stand up. But what happens when you face somebody who's got more power than you, who's got a little bit more strength than you? That's now another weapon that they have against you. It's another thing in their arsenal. And here's something that is not spoken about enough. It's like you're saying, it gives you confidence because you've prepared. And one of my earliest mentors in strength and conditioning was actually a two-time All-American wrestler, Ethan Reeve. He was an All-American at University of Tennessee in the 70s, back when Dan Gable was competing. So I think he took sixth and then third, junior year, senior year. But he said his first 2 years, he couldn't place at nationals. And he said eventually he's like, I just looked at the physiques and I looked at the wrestling of the guys who were winning. He's like, and they had a powerful physique. But what did Coach Reeve do? I was like, Coach Reeve. Coach Reeve, since eighth grade, would do 500 push ups a day. He said, even after I weighed in on the day of the state finals, he's like, I did my 500 push ups before I wrestled. He's like, and then when I got to college and I started lifting and doing power cleans and weighted pull ups, he's like, when I was warming up on this side of the mat and I looked across, he's like, I knew that other guy didn't train as hard as I did. And that confidence is like a secret weapon. It's a
Yeah.
secret weapon for a wrestler. And so, what's holding athletes back from going into the weight room? I think there's a lot of things, but one that you said, Dalton, is time. They're going to the wrestling club and and this is every athlete. Even, we look outside of wrestling, we look at baseball, basketball, volleyball. They go to so many clubs and coaches that they don't know what the heck to do with somebody because they're always told what to do. And because they're always running to all these, they go to like two different clubs, then they go to the coach and do a private with the coach at his house. They wrestle so much that they're just trying to survive from one wrestling practice to the next. So they have no time to lift. And honestly, some kids, this is the truth, this is going to hurt feelings. Some of them don't really want it that badly because if they really wanted to win, they would listen and they would say, is this what could help me get better? Tell me what to do and I'll do it. But instead, they say, I don't want to. I have this quote. I say, I'm on my own program. What own program are you on? I tell kids, like, if I can't help you because you're on your own program, why are you on your own program? Have you won the past two state titles? Is there a college coach coming here to watch you wrestle every week? If not, you should actually listen so I could give you something that gets you better. And so they're overcoached so much that they almost become uncoachable. And I remember seeing it at the college level. This was interesting. Like I remember when Coach Goodale went to Rutgers and was taking over the program, a lot of Jersey guys who had gone elsewhere and then transferred back to Rutgers. They went to Pennsylvania, Ohio, Minnesota, you name it. Then they came back they were like bringing to him their old club coach. Like they needed these people in their corner. When really what should have been happening is, hey, Coach Leonardis and Coach Scott Goodale are your coaches. Now they're taking you, but they couldn't let go of their old coaches. So to move on, the athlete, the wrestler must evolve and be open minded into this next phase or this extra thing of coaching, because that is how one gets better. You have to, like, I still do it with strength training. I listen to what other coaches are doing. I'm trying to learn and pick up one thing that I can implement to make our wrestlers better. And so I think athletes are like overcoached, that they can't handle, they just crave doing something on their own. Like they're going to 3 different wrestling clubs. They just want to lift alone and not have somebody tell them what to do over and over again.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely think a lot of people are overcoached. I think that we, again, in a weird way, it's like a competitive atmosphere for coaching. Like who's the coach? Like who
Correct.
gets to be the one? And for me, I always look back at my own experience, and I'm so grateful that I kind of had to find my own path like by myself. I had to go into the weight room and work out, and I just had to figure a lot of things out myself. And I think that's one of the things I like about like maybe like older athletes, because of the internet wasn't available, because there wasn't a lot of programs. The athletes that had a lot of success were the ones that just kind of figured it out themselves. They created a disciplined schedule and they stuck to it, and then they improvised. They evolved as they went and thought about what they needed to do and stuff like that. But yeah, there's a lot of overcoaching, that's for sure. Obviously, I think that lifting, wrestling practice is hard enough. And if you go heavy on squats and you feel really sore, wrestling practice gets even harder
Yeah.
mentally. Maybe not physically. Like I think once your body moves and the blood starts flowing, everything kind of like works itself out. But just mentally, you're dreading that through that feeling. And I wish there was a way to get kids to do those types of workouts where their bodies get really sore so they become adjusted to
Resilient.
soreness, right?
Yes.
Like we just
Resilient.
yeah, yeah. But I feel, don't you think that, I mean, do you ever get resilient? Like, I mean, you never get used to, or sorry, you never like not get sore. You just kind of
Well,
get used to the soreness.
I know what you're saying, Dalton. So here's the issue. If you don't have a consistent off season, and this is what wrestling coaches do, and a lot of sport coaches, and it's pretty friggin' dumb. They do no off season strength training. They just let the kids do what they want. Then the wrestling coach starts the season and they're like, we're lifting and we're wrestling. Okay, so we're lifting, but you haven't, what happened the 9 months? What about the other 9 months? No, that's it. Just, and so now the kids get sore because they've been doing, quote unquote, I'm on my own program. Now the coach has them doing these highly intense workouts coupled with highly intense wrestling practice, and they are not married together. They actually negate one another. So, what is the best in season wrestling strength training program? The best one is preceded by a great slash consistent off-season strength training program, because without a great off-season, we have not built a base, a foundation. And so now you're shocking the body, you're piling work on top of work, when what is the most important thing during wrestling season? Wrestling.
Wrestling.
That's it. And so when a wrestling coach is trying to be a strength coach and he doesn't have the expertise, and no offense to them, right? Because I don't know, maybe some of them do. If we were in old Soviet Union and these Russian states, the sport coach was also the physical preparation coach. In the Soviet Union, like Alexander Karelin did his PhD thesis on the suplex, and other athletes would do, other coaches would do their PhD on the triple broad, on the triple long jump. So they were so into it. Whereas now, wrestling coaches, not all, but the majority, will just copy some random shit from popular YouTube videos and blindly copy it with a bunch of kids who can't do 10 pull-ups. So if we have wrestlers that can't do 10 pull-ups, and by the way, I've seen many high school wrestlers who can't do one pull-up, what, you don't need anything fancy at
Yeah.
all. You probably don't even need a barbell with those kids. And so in-season strength training for a wrestler should be short and to the point, especially at the high school level, because the workout is not divided. When I coached at Lehigh and Rutgers, we train at 8 a.m. and 9 a.m. They come back and wrestle at 3 or 4 p.m. They've had 6 or 7 hours of rest. They've had 2 meals. They've possibly had a nap. They've had a shower. They maybe even went to the athletic trainer and got some compression boots on. So they've gone through recovery. Whereas in high school, you're lifting and then wrestling, or vice versa, wrestle and lift. And then if you do that for a kid who's untrained, you're in big trouble because they're just exhausted. So if you, as a wrestling coach, want to have an in-season lifting program, then you must take it upon yourself to organize and coach an off-season wrestling strength program twice a week. And if you don't know how to do it, then you should partner with a local strength coach who could help you.
Yeah. No, I like that you said that, because one of the things that I have conflicting ideas on is like the wrestling community is
Excuse me.
constantly promoting the off-season wrestling schedule. So the freestyle, Greco, national stuff.
Yes.
And one of the problems that I have is like, maybe there's a top 5 percentile that competes in that, but the 95% of high school athletes should dedicate themselves to this physical regimen to get their physical body developed more, right? Because again, like you said, high level wrestlers you can find that don't have the physical development. The low levels ones definitely don't have it, and so the competition season never stops. So it never gives people the break to just go dedicate to building their body.
There's no
And
time off anymore.
yeah,
It's brutal on the body.
yeah, because what I was going to ask you is, what do you think about this? Because I've always found myself lifting in cycles. So I've never really lifted really, really hard for 12 months, but there's always been 4 to 6 months where I've lifted really heavy, and then I found myself wrestling a lot, and then I
Yes.
have an off season and I lift heavy, and then I
Perfect.
wrestle. So yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's perfect. And I think also this wrestling is strength training. I'm
Yeah.
just lifting a human body. It's not a barbell, dumbbell, kettlebell. So when I'm lifting somebody, that is my strength training, right? So when a doctor says you shouldn't be strength training this and that, well, listen, where did you grow up, by the way, Dalton? What state?
Illinois.
Yep. So I'm not sure if you grew up in the suburbs or outside in the farm area, but I'm
Yeah.
in New Jersey,
Outside.
outside. So I always remember thinking to myself, oh, in Pennsylvania, at age 5, a kid wakes up before school and carries buckets of water out to the animals on the farm, carries horse feed or cow feed. They are quote unquote strength training. And if I strength train crazy all year long, then that's my priority over wrestling. The number one priority of sport is the sport skill itself. And I think we could also vary the sport. So, meaning I go into wrestling during the winter time. Then in the late winter and spring, we've got freestyle and Greco. Very good. It actually goes all the way up until late July because of Fargo and Nationals. Then we kind of have August off. Then now the fall, a couple of years ago, 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, is now becoming heavy duty wrestling tournament time. Whereas I used to like to say that would be a great time for a wrestler to go to a judo club for, 8 weeks and kind of open up their repertoire of wrestling versus always hitting takedowns. Well, if you're not doing freestyle and Greco in the spring, then you could strength train. But I'd also think you want to pick up a new skill. That could be judo if you're not doing freestyle or Greco. The good thing about freestyle and Greco is it makes you more athletic. Okay. And to train hard year round, you can't do it because, like you said, in season, the priority has to be wrestling. Okay. So I want my training in season to be short. Some of the kids at my private facility lift for about 25 minutes in season. 25 minutes. They go through a little bit of a warm up with dumbbells, kettlebells, body weight, just to get the elbows, the joints, and the blood flowing. Even though they were at practice, that's different. They probably went home, they took a shower, they ate a little bit. So they're not technically warmed up anymore. Then we go into some submax strength work coupled with power work. So what I'm doing is filling the gaps that are not taken care of during wrestling. We do zero conditioning in season because if they're wrestling hard, that's their best form of conditioning. And I want them to leave feeling better than when they walked in. So we do some recovery work at the end. We might do a foam roller, a little foam roller routine. We do something called body tempering, which is a form of recovery, but also strength training because of how it loads the body. So people could Google or go on YouTube and look up body tempering. But when you were talking about those hard off-season workouts, when I was at Rutgers, that's what we did in the summertime. There's no competition in sight. They're not in school. So they've eliminated emotional stressors. And when your emotional stress is down, you've got a lot of energy. So some of our summer workouts were very intense because I knew they could sleep in. They're not making weight, but the body doesn't really know stress. So I always would say to guys, what's a bigger stressor, the hard squat workout or the argument you're having with your girlfriend? Well, the argument you're having with your girlfriend is bothering your stomach. You don't want to eat. It's strained. You're exhausted. You can't sleep. You can't focus. Your body doesn't understand that that's the stress coming from a person versus a barbell. And so when we could mitigate stressors, we could increase intensity of training. If we can recover better, okay, and these are a lot of the colleges are really pushing the facilities. Like I was at Cornell a couple months ago, and I was also at Cornell when they just built the building. You know, they got a hyperbaric chamber in there. They've got all the hot and cold tubs. They've got the athletic trainer. Rutgers does the same. Michigan does the same. If I could recover at a very high level, I could come back and train harder and I could get more out of my body. But if you're always pushing the training and you're not addressing the bucket, which is recovery, then you're just kind of pulling gas out of a vehicle, so to speak. And so I think wrestlers and parents of wrestlers and coaches have to do a great job of educating their kids, and parents have to get really dialed in with nutrition and recovery, meaning with these kids running around to all these clubs, kids are not having home cooked meals. I'm going to this club. Then we're going to strength training. Then we're going to pick up your sister from here. The kid is in the car for 3 hours a day. And now he's got to eat his dinner from 7-Eleven. Whereas I want you to go home, like right here. Look, I got beef stew right here, beef stew, potatoes, carrots, bone broth, beef broth. That's what wrestlers should be eating. Breakfast should be, 2 eggs, a piece of toast with butter. No, they skip breakfast. Pack your lunch, chicken and rice, heat it up in the morning, put it in a thermos. No, I'm buying the school lunch, quote unquote. I'm too busy. What are you eating after school? Nothing. And so the high school kids are training hard, but their nutrition is shitty, their recovery is shitty. And that's why we're seeing more injuries than ever before. And we're also seeing a massive separation of wrestlers. You either see ranked beginners or super elite kids, high school kids beating Olympic level wrestlers. But what we need to do is take that 80% in the middle, okay? The top 10%, the bottom 10%, take that 80% and build them with proper strength training, proper nutrition, get some sort of wrestling going on twice a week or judo or any kind of combatives, because those 80% are going to help high school teams win more matches, win more dual meets. Your elite kids, there's 2 or 3 of them on every team, unless you're at a private school. Then every kid is like a freshman is a nationally ranked kid. So
Yeah.
at the public school level, we need kind of a much better organization, and we need the coaches to work together. A lot of wrestling coaches don't want to like reach out to somebody like me who has a private facility and say, help me do this, consult with me, or take these kids on, or organize a team. They want to do everything on their own, and then they're not really doing it the right way. I hate to admit it. They're kind of doing
Well,
it
or
wrong.
they're just not doing it. So they don't want somebody else to
Yes.
do it, but then they won't do it themselves.
Which, listen, I'm going to explain, Dalton, as a dad of 2 kids in sports. I I'll help. Like if, let's say my son used to wrestle, now it's baseball, basketball, but let's say he was on the wrestling team and they were like, we're going to bring in a strength coach. He's going to come here twice a week. I would get all the parents together and say, everybody get me $100 or Venmo this guy $100 and he'll train our kids during the season. Okay. Now it's the off season. All right, everybody. We got 7, 8, 9 months of the off season. Everybody Venmo $250 to, Coach John Smith here. And he's going to train our kids twice a week. $250 across 9 months is like, I'm not good at math, $30 a month. I don't know. It's less than $1 a day. And that's where we need to be. We need experts to help these kids so they could bypass doing things the wrong way, which is unfortunately what I see. Like, there's a video on Instagram. Mark Hall is at UPenn and he's taking all the guys through a plate workout. All right, a plate workout is good, but Mark Hall is strong as all hell. That plate workout is just like a muscular endurance, mental toughness thing for him and for those guys. But when you're in the college level, that plate workout is not really going to be the difference maker. Even Kyle Dake, years ago, he was on the Spartan Up podcast. They asked him, what's your favorite exercise? He said, power cleans. He gets out of college. He's undefeated, never takes a red shirt, 4-time national champ. And then he's doing functional patterns, right? He's jumping, doing all this twisting cable stuff. And now people see that and they think that's what their kid should do. And it's like, hey, listen, guys, that's Kyle Dake, 4-time national champion, who said his favorite exercise was power cleans. He's built a foundation. Now he could do whatever the heck he wants to do. Your son, who can't do one pull up or can't run a mile without having, like chest pain, doesn't need to be doing that. He needs to be lifting like he's working on a farm. That's what he needs.
Yeah. No, I would agree. Whenever I talk to people about that, I always talk about there's a spectrum, like a spectrum of weight exercises from least important to most important when you first
Nice.
get started.
Yep.
And it's like, if you only have, like you said, if you only have 25 minutes, start with the most crucial, right? Get your squats, get your push-ups, get your pull-ups, get your pull down, just start basic. And then once you have more time and energy and effort and muscle, then you can work to all these other dynamic things. But yeah, I'm with you that a lot of people can't do the most basic things. But then when they go to, again, the downfall, and I think this is why I wanted you on too, because the beautiful thing about the internet is also the bad thing, right? There's an abundance of options, so you don't necessarily know if you're following the right one. But the beauty is also that you have the ability to find somebody who's not necessarily right next to you. Because in my area, I've seen strength and conditioning programs in the area, but they're not led by people who are actually like strong. They're led by just people who wanted to be a strength coach that, have no athletic background, have no physical, stature themselves currently. They're not lifting weights, they're not performing athletic movements and stuff. And then they're trying to train people. So the internet does have the opportunity to
You
kind of
can't
like,
fake it. You
yeah,
cannot fake it. And you know what's like, because I've been immersed in wrestling, I can do an exercise and like visualize where this will help. So a dad sent me a video of his son hitting a double, but struggling to finish it. And he's like, see right here, if he was stronger. And I said, no. He said, my son's got all the wrestling skills. I go, no, he doesn't. He's in on a shot. His head is down. His ass is up in the air. That would be like me telling you to deadlift with your ass in the air and your chest down. Strength training is all about position. Better position, better technique, stronger lift. Same thing in wrestling. If I could maintain position better, I often can win the move. Now, wrestling has evolved the past 10 years. It used to be very head to head, toe to toe, aggressive fighting. Now, kids are on their back, holding onto your ankle, twisting, turning. They don't give moves up. So that means you must finish your move faster, especially when we're talking about being on your feet. Number two, your flexibility needs to be better, especially hamstrings and hips, because of the way kids are not letting go of moves. Number three, you need that durability, as you said earlier. we are seeing more knee injuries in wrestling than ever before. I don't need to look at the research papers. I'm just looking at the teams all the time and how many wrestlers are out because of a torn ACL or ACL and MCL and PCL. Why? Their knees are getting hyperextended because nobody's letting go of the move. You know, look at wrestling from the 90s and early 2000s on YouTube for like D1 national finals, any national final, or even high school. And now look at it today. You know, the funk wrestling that has, you know, Ben Askren really popularized, of all that rolling through. It's changed the need for wrestlers to be strong in uncomfortable positions, which is why I love to use sandbags and those medicine balls where you have to crouch down very low and, you know, muscle things up in weird positions, because wrestlers need to be strong in awkward positions. I call it be strong all around. And it's also why I think, you know, I always would say, why Pennsylvania wrestlers beat New Jersey wrestlers so much? Because if they grow up on a farm, they get strong in awkward positions. Whereas if you're always just doing the weight room, it's sometimes too perfect. You know, I'm going to do this squat perfectly. I'm going to deadlift in this perfect position. Whereas for wrestling, I want to get strong in awkward positions. My buddy calls it field strong when in relation to football. You know, for wrestling, it's like strong all around. And so, you know, the best wrestlers marry the two of them together. You need strength training if you want to be great. Also, you know, I'll look. You mentioned the internet, the power of it. Now we get to see the wrestling training in the different like states of Russia, right? Dagestan, Uzbekistan, Azerbaijan. We get to see how they've trained. And in America, we're so worried about technology and these beautiful gyms. Then you see these guys like running hills, training with stones. You see their technique is not really great with weightlifting, but they are very explosive. I have an old, it's on my, I'm going to get something real quick. Hold on, Dalton. So I have an old article on wrestling training. It says 1994. And this was called the Fitness and Sport Review International, but what it used to be called was the Soviet Sport Review by Dr. Michael Yesses. Dr. Michael Yesses passed away last year. He wrote a great book called Secrets of Soviet Sport and Fitness Training. And then when the Soviet Union broke up, he called it Secrets of Russian Sport Training. But I was at my friend's company, Elite FTS in Ohio, and I got lucky. I just opened, he had thousands of these. I opened it up randomly and found this article, Speed Training for Wrestlers. And it was written by, I think, Russian professors. And it's so funny because, you know, when I'm doing things like plyometrics, we're doing very low reps. It's optimal. It's quote unquote perfect. And then I look at this, and there's nothing really perfect. It's kind of random stuff. So it's like shadow fighting, 5 sharp hits per series, 5 series in total. Then, you know, vertical jumps across a chair 20 or more times. I'm like, oh, 20 times? We've always done 3 or 5 because we're so worried that somebody's going to be tired. Fast squats up and down 20 or more times. Imitation of an ankle trip, right and left leg 10 times or more. What does that mean? Shadow drill for speed, for high reps. For the trunk, right? People in America call it the core. The trunk is the entirety of your core, your obliques, your lower back. Think of a trunk, a tree, versus the core of an apple, right? Much more powerful wording. It says lean side to side from blows 15 or more times. But they're doing speed training for high reps. Yet in America, we're testing everything. We're putting you and connecting you to all these machines. And we're so busy testing and trying to make everything perfect and trying to make it look good for Instagram that we're not actually training hard. It's just so damn perfect. And if, you know, you connect with like the strongest weightlifters overseas, China, Romania, Bulgaria, Sure, they've taken and continue to take steroids, but they will say that we got very good at technique in our younger years, and then we focused on getting very strong. And so that kind of makes me think of like Penn State wrestling. We don't really know what they're doing there. They've mentioned they do play wrestling. They've kind of mentioned that they spend quite a lot of time on the mat. But one of their kids I trained for a little bit in high school, Anthony Cassar, and he got really big when he got to college. And then I look at other guys like Bo Nickel. He doesn't really look like he lifts more. And I said to myself, I bet you, Coach, Kale is like, hey, Anthony, you like to lift? Go ahead, hit the weight room. Bo, you want to live on the mat? Go ahead. Wrestle for 2 hours in the morning, come back, do it again for 2 hours. But wrestling is strength training, right? Anthony just did probably more of it in the weight room. And so I think there needs to be kind of this art blended with the science. And I think in America, we're kind of being led by too many non-experts until the collegiate level. And so reading this old book, 94 that's when I graduated high school in 93. I'm 48. So it's like 30, I don't know. That's a little 30 plus years ago. This article is 30 years old. 30 years old. And what they're talking about is ahead of what we're really doing today. In America, we could get better, but like you said, there's too many coaches. And also, who do you see coaching the youth in all these like Eastern European countries? You see like world level people coaching them. In America, we're starting to get there. Some of our best collegiate wrestlers are now opening clubs. And so the kids are getting this high level training. Whereas when I grew up, the coach was like just a former high school coach, or sometimes,
Yeah.
just copying stuff out of a book. So there's a lot of like ways it could go right. There's a lot of ways it could go wrong. And the toughest thing for parents and coaches is, can you sift through what gets the most views on Instagram and YouTube versus what's really good for who you're working with? That's
Yeah.
the tough thing.
Yeah, I think you said it well. I mean, that's the name of the game. There's a lot of positive, there's a lot of negative. It's the individual's ability to decipher what is the right path, and even if they pick the thing that's the wrong path, how quick they can make the adjustments um to on their path so that they don't fail too bad, and they
Like I
can make
did. Yeah,
adjustments.
I
Yeah.
trained very hard, but I did all the wrong stuff. So I put a lot of effort into like machines and cables and squeezing the muscle and doing a lot of long distance running. And so I made my muscles look good, but not strong and powerful, and then I would do distance running in season, which is just adding conditioning on top of all the conditioning from wrestling, plus a lot of impact on the knees. And so I just broke my body down. So what you need to do is training must complement the season that you're in. So like you said, you have to kind of waive your training for the time of year.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Well, Zach, thanks for jumping on here.
Thank you.
I hope that we can figure out a way and keep a conversation going. And if
Yes.
you have any thoughts about the wrestling season after the wrestling season, let's jump on and talk about what you've experienced. That seeing how you're going through, you're coaching a lot of wrestlers right now. So, yeah, I appreciate your time. And if there's anything or any place that people can follow you. You are on Instagram, YouTube, um,
Yeah.
and yeah, what else you got
I
going
think
on you
that
want
would
to
be
share?
great, like for them to get the visual Instagram, YouTube. If they're a coach, they should go to undergroundstrengthcoach.com. We've got 1,000+ videos of behind the scenes video footage from my gym, days from training them out of the garage, seminars that are recorded. And so it's an educational hub for sport coaches who want to implement strength and conditioning. And if they want to listen, we have the Strong Life podcast. I think they'll enjoy that as well.
Alrighty. Well, thanks a lot, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you, bro.